Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise. The importance of effective criminal justice system for the smooth running of any society is essential because a transparent criminal justice system is fundamental to the maintenance of law and order. In Nigeria, the criminal justice system is not only fairly effective, it is also outdated in many regards. As a result, lawyers, especially those on the defense side, are taking advantages of the loopholes and have become masters of dilatory tactics, making it increasingly difficult to reach closure of any kind in many criminal cases. Because convictions and acquittals have become exceedingly rare, joining us now to speak on what Lagos State is doing to strengthen its criminal justice system is Dr. Jide Martin, Director of the Directorate of Public Prosecution in Lagos State. Good morning, Dr. Jide Martin.
Good morning.
And
Thank you
welcome
for inviting me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you. I want to start with just sort of looking at the overall criminal justice system in Nigeria, because one of the things that we've talked about over and over on this show, and also had economists talk about, is that rule of law is one of the most basic tenements of democracies that also help build economies. As you look at the Nigeria system, before we get into the Lagos State system, when you look at, also too, a couple of weeks ago, there was a headline that said Nigeria's judiciary is one of the most corrupt judiciaries. How do you react, especially seeing the work that you're doing in Lagos, when you look at the national, because the origin country story is always going to overshadow the state?
I think what's very important in terms of assessing the effectiveness of the legal system, particularly the judicial system, is the criteria that has been set by international benchmark. And to what extent we are able to comply with those criteria will be a determining factor in assessing how effective our legal system is, more primarily on the issue of rule of law. Rule of law is very, very important in order to ensure that the citizen benefit from dividend of democracy. So when you're referring to rule of law, you're looking at transparency in decision-making, accountability, bringing justice for people in sort of commercial conflict and getting those resolved as quickly as possible, bringing justice to people who have infracted the law, and also creating an enabling environment for the economy to grow, more especially in terms of SME, small and medium scale outgoing, and also inward investments in Nigeria. So all these things have sort of interlinked and it's all intertwined. So when we are talking about rule of law, it's very, very important that it encompasses all the narratives. I think what we are doing in Lagos is to key into the vision of the government. When the Lagos State governor was inaugurated, he had 6 major platforms on which to execute his mandate, and one of those is about the importance of governance, security and governance. So security and governance encompass creating an enabling environment to ensure that businesses thrive and commercial conflicts are resolved, and also inward investment and also SME to grow. And in order to be able to do that, you can't thrive, you can't have a 21st century economy without creating an enabling environment. And that's what the government of Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu has committed to in his inaugural lecture. His Excellency has committed to ensuring that traffic management and transportation is sorted out, health and environment, education and technology, making Lagos a 21st economy, entertainment and tourism, and security and governance. There is a sort of intertwined, is all interlinked. So all these goals cannot be achieved if you don't have a robust legal system that give respect to rule of law, that give respect to sanctity of contract, that have an effective judicial system where issues are resolved without causing delays, without causing unnecessary bottleneck. And this also tie into federal government commitment on ease of doing business. You remember recently we've been upped in terms of ranking. All these impacts would have to be cascaded down. So you can see the government commitment to these teams has an impact on ease of doing business, because you cannot transact business in an economy in the 21st century without ensuring all these factors. So
Indeed, one of the indices in the Ease of Doing Business report is enforcing contracts.
Yes.
Each state in each country is rated based on that, and the country as a whole, it's important.
Yes.
But we're talking about criminal justice now. I want you to address, and thank you for mentioning the rule of law as a tenet of democracy.
Yes.
There's also separation of powers. And there's the impression, especially with a state like Lagos, that is so dominantly APC, really there's no argument there, I'm sure, that the judiciary might not, and your office might not be able to properly dispense its duties because you're so under the influence of the executive. How would you comment on that, first of all? And also, how have you found the new Lagos State practice rules that have come into force from last month? Has that helped in any way with expediting the justice system?
Yeah, I think it's very important to emphasize that we civil servants, we are sworn to oath of allegiance to be faithful and committed to any government of the day. We are not particularly influenced by, any government of the day. But what we are employed to do is to drive the policy of the executive arm of the government, which we are obliged to do. We do that to the best of our ability without any interference or favor. Obviously, the executive, headed by His Excellency Governor Jide Sanwo-Olu, is the chief policy maker and executor. Whatever directives he has given, we as civil servants have to follow that. And we are doing that in Lagos State, the Ministry of Justice, under the able leadership of the Solicitor General Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Funlola Odunlame. So she liaises with the head of service, liaises with the government, and cascade directives of the government down the line, of which we are all obliged to comply with. Talking specifically on the issue of criminal justice system, I think it has an interface with creating an enabling environment. Criminal justice, to put it basically, is looking at three things: ensuring that people who commit crime are brought to justice to make sure that justice is done, and also ensuring a safe and secure environment for other economic activities, and also to ensure that the victims of crime are also compensated, or they have their rights remedied because of the infraction of the person who has committed crime. So those are the three perspectives from which one can look at the issue of criminal justice. And there are key stakeholders. We are one of the key stakeholders, the Directorate of Public Prosecution, headed by Ms. Titilayo Jide. In our department, we have about 80 officers trying their best to ensure that we create that enabling environment, to ensure that we are able to comply with the goal set aside for us by the policymaker, headed by the governor. And in doing that, we have to work with other stakeholders. We work with the police, we work with the prison authority, we work with the judges and the magistrate. So it's not a singular role. So there is need to have a sort of symbiotic relationship between all the key stakeholders in the judicial system. And even more importantly, the NGO as well, and the community in general. They are also a pivotal, part of this narrative, because the NGOs are there to make sure that people's rights are brought to our attention, and also to serve as an informal gauge for effectiveness of all the other stakeholders. So they are doing a very, very important job, and all the other professionals that are involved in the administration of criminal justice. So everybody has a role, and there's need to ensure that we have a symbiotic relationship to ensure that one's deficiency doesn't affect the other one. So there is need for continuous review of law, continuous review of policies, continuous review of directives to ensure that we are able to effectively deliver on the mandate of the government.
But how are the new practice rules going? Because the public perception of the criminal justice system is that it's slow. Even the Nielsen case, which you're on, that hasn't been stalled by a want of prosecution on your behalf. Yes. It's issues like a witness can stall the case and all these things. So how are the new practice rules, trying to expedite the process, the same way that, front-loading has done for civil litigation?
Yes. I think one of the things that has emerged from the practice rule is that it's very, very important that people keep adherence to specific time targets. And in doing that, if you fail, there's consequential orders that have punitive effect will be made by the state. But obviously, when I say by the state, by the judiciary. And that sort of keep everybody on their toe in order to ensure effective compliance with the law. I think its impact is always going to be very, very effective and ongoing. Is a wake-up call for everybody to do their best at specific, because all these issues about legal remedies and solutions and resolution of conflict, they are all time-bound and specifics. And in order to make it effective, there's need for all stakeholders to adhere to that. But however, like I said...
We're gonna actually ask you to hold that thought while we go on a quick break. When we come back, we'll let you continue.
Okay, thank you so much.
Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We're still with Dr. Jide Martin, Directorate of Public Prosecutions, Lagos State. We were talking about expediting the criminal justice system. Let's also talk about the administration of criminal justice law of Lagos State, that trailblazing law, because quite frankly, Lagos State, we have to be honest, is the best place to live, judicially speaking, in Nigeria. You tend to be at the vanguard of reform. So that law abolished stay of proceedings in criminal cases, trying to make the process faster. But there's still a lot of work to be done. So can we discuss what other reforms have been implemented?
Yes, I'm glad that you acknowledge the setting role of Lagos State government. In fact, our criminal justice administration law dated back as 2007, and it has been the basis for which all other administration law has emerged, including the Administration of Criminal Justice Act by the federal government in 2015. So we've always set the pace, but we cannot afford to be self-complacent in terms of reforming the administration of criminal justice. We are not going to be derailed by all the challenges that is incumbent in the system. Obviously, all the major stakeholders, there are challenges, but they are not insurmountable challenges. They are challenges that can be overcome with introduction of technology and innovation, with commitment on the part of staff. And I can say without fear of contradiction that the caliber of the people that we have in the criminal justice system in Lagos are people of integrity who are trying their best to ensure that there is justice delivery for all citizens and for an effective criminal justice system. Because without an effective criminal justice system, economic development and other things will not manifest, will not be able to take place. So in terms of other things that we are doing, for example, now, in bringing criminal to justice, we are ensuring that we introduce plea bargain in terms of ensuring to encourage citizens who know they have infracted the law to plea to a level of sentence or an offense in order to resolve the matter. That will cut down the time spent in terms of awaiting trial and in terms of trial. So since we introduced the plea bargain from 2018, I think we've dealt with over 300 applications, which ordinarily would have been there clocking the judicial, system in terms of awaiting trial. So it's very, very innovative way of dealing with. Within our law that you rightly mentioned, Section 75 and Section 76 of the Administration of Criminal Justice Law 2015 provide for plea bargain. And we've been encouraging suspects, people who are awaiting trial, to avail themselves of that opportunity by embarking on, prison visit. The Office of Directorate of Public Prosecution, headed by Ms. Jide, we've visited all the major prisons in Lagos State to encourage citizens to be able to come up with plea bargain. Plea bargain can be in two forms. It could be the nature of the offense or the level of punishment. For example, if somebody was charged with murder, he can decide to plead for manslaughter. That is the nature of the offense. Or if somebody is charged with an offense that, like, for example, armed robbery, which will be capital punishment, you can decide to plead to robbery, which is 21 years. So that will be the nature of as to the level of sentence. So it's really decongesting the prison system and also decongesting the workload of the judges. And for us as well, that means we can divert our energy to all those cases that will go for contested hearing without having to worry about where you have plea bargain. So we have a plea bargain committee that sits on those decisions and make a decision. We write back to the defense solicitor if they are agreeable to the plea, and they will take such and will report back to the court. The advantage with the plea bargain is that at the end of the day, the court still have the power to pretend that process. If the court think it's not what our purpose, the court can decide to reject it and ask the defendant to go ahead and have a trial. So you have the courts there to serve as a sort of sifting mechanism to ensure that justice is served for the purpose. The other thing we've also done with all the prison institution in Lagos State is that we've been able to set up a Lagos State criminal information system that capture all the biometrics of every person in prison in Lagos State, Ikoyi, Maximum, Medium, Badagry, all the prison in Lagos State. We can tell you at the press of button how many inmates are there, how many are waiting for trial, how many are there for a particular type of offense, how many ones have been convicted. That initiative was brought by Lagos State government and is supported in order to ensure that we apply technology and innovation to ease of doing the work in the Directorate of Public Prosecution. So that's one area that we've worked on. Another area that is also very important for the state is in the area of public prosecution of tax evaders. We have a tax prosecution unit within the Directorate of Public Prosecution. So we work with the Inland Revenue to get files and prosecute cases on behalf of Inland Revenue. We have seen an increase in number of people that will pay the tax once they know the threat of prosecution is real. So there has been an increase in terms of reduction in number of defaulters because of threat of prosecution. So we are doing, and that fits into the agenda of His Excellency, Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu, to make sure that the economy grows, because you can't do anything when you have a dwindling revenue or resources for this. Effectiveness of any government and to make a Lagos a greater place, a greater economy, is the amount of revenue that can come in, and also how you create an enabling environment for economy to grow. So all those things have an interlinking, everything imparts on one another.
Yeah. I want to shift gears a little bit, because I think that there's something very topical and a little bit about what Tunde was saying. One of the things we've seen, especially when it comes to sexual assault conversations, and also we've had some lawyers here who have commended Lagos State as one of the best places to get justice. I want to talk to you about the special court that is set up. Tell us a little bit about how that works, how people can get access to it, and how we can make sure that people are getting the justice they deserve. Because once again, those cases do take a long time.
I think the special court unit is a fallout of the creation of Lagos State Domestic and Sexual Offences Response Unit. At the state level, at the Ministry of Justice, that body was created. It was an inter-agency organization. You have professionals from Ministry of Education, Health, Social Welfare, lawyers, and everybody collaborating with one another to provide solution for victims of domestic and sexual offenses. And because we realize that if you put all those cases through the normal court process, delay often, gets the people get disinclined, so to say. So with the judiciary now coming out with the special offenses court, all those cases are taken to the special offenses court. And I know in Lagos we have about 3 of those courts. I know Justice Sholadoye, Justice Cholebo, and Justice Nwaka. So what happened is that we work in conjunction with the State Police Command that has a gender unit. And one of the things we've been able to do with sexual offenses, we call down bureaucracy. Normally, all offenses get through Panti before it can be sent to us for prosecution. But for sexual offenses, each police investigator at the local level or at the gender unit can send cases to us directly for legal advice. So that cuts down the amount of time it will take from cases to move from the division Panti, then Panti will now send it to us. So that's one of the innovation that we've come out with in order to ensure that cases like that are fast-tracked, so to say. And in our department, we are able to identify all those cases by particular marking on those files. So it comes to the attention of the DPP, it comes to the attention of other directors and other officers that these are cases that needed to be effectively and quickly dispensed with. But I wouldn't say so, like your colleague alluded to earlier. There are other factors outside our control that causes delay. At times, non-availability of witnesses. But what we do in the state is that we have a witness support unit that goes up and down the country to look for witnesses who have been transferred maybe as police officer or who have relocated because of the impact of domestic violence, to try and bring them back, and we pay their expenses. We even provide accommodation for them overnight so that you can bring them to court. But at times the lawyers might not be there, and when lawyers are not there, you can't really do anything. It doesn't matter how keen you are as a prosecutor. When the defense lawyer is not there, you can't really go ahead. So those are the constraints that we have. And we try as much as possible to also provide support for victims, because it goes beyond getting justice for them. There's need for, counseling and whatever. So that's why the role of the domestic violence and sexual response unit becomes very, very pivotal, because we have professionals within that team that offers and also work with NGO to support victims of domestic and sexual offenses. And the government is very, very keen on this particular, because obviously there has been a surge. And one or two reasons could be accountable for the surge. It could be like victims are getting more confident to come out and report. And I'm sure there are so many in public domain without me mentioning particular case. And also celebrities and other people and NGO are also encouraging victims to come out and talk about it. And the ministry and the state government is also doing enough to bring awareness and sensitization to the people. So that surge could be as a result of all those raising awareness. So people have confidence to now come forward and report all those kind of offenses.
As you sort of look at the fact that there's a lot going on with the victim and also a lot of support going on with the victim, when you look at the perpetrators and having something like a sexual offender directory, do you think this is something that Lagos State will put in place in the future?
Yes. I think what needs to be done, I think the law needs to be rejigged so that the judicial officer will also make it as part of the sentence to say you must be registered on Lagos State Criminal Information System. We do it now as a matter of on the need basis. If somebody has been convicted, if we get the information through our officers in court, we get that information updated onto the system. Bearing in mind, like I said earlier, we've captured all the people and the nature of offenses which they are facing in courts. But like you have in other jurisdictions, like in UK or US, where you have a robust register of sex offenders where people can make application to make inquiries about, history or antecedents of perpetrators. I think as time goes on, it will become the norm in Nigeria.
For sex offenders or criminals in general?
Or criminals generally. Well, we have that information now.
So for the public to access?
Yes.
There's limited access now because there's limited information on it. But as time goes on, the information will increase. People will become more aware of the availability of such information and will be able to have probably a particular unit to deal with that, because one has to be very, very careful as a government. You can't give information that you are unsure of to members of public when you know decisions will be made on those information in probably determining somebody's career prospect or whatever. So there is need for further legislation to formalize that kind of arrangement. What it does now, we have access to the information on an ad hoc basis. The state prosecutors work with the prison authority and work with the police. We have access to it. But the members of the public do not have access to it as a matter of course. So everybody who made an application, that application has to be considered by the Solicitor General Permanent Secretary and take a decision to see why do you need that information, unlike other jurisdictions that everybody can have
Just open
access to it.
Yes.
Now, I want to ask you a question still on your database, but before I do that, I have to once again commend Lagos State for your domestic and sexual violence response unit. I saw on the news this last week a Russian family, the daughters killed their father, and in Russia, domestic violence is treated just like a family matter. It's not prosecuted. So very well done, Lagos State.
Thank you.
Because people always say, oh, Nigeria is the lowest of the low, but we are not.
No.
We are
Not when
making
it
strides.
is.
But we have to go on a short break now. When we come back, we'll still talk about your database. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We're still with Dr. Jide Martin, Director, Directorate of Public Prosecutions, Lagos State. So I wanted to ask you about your database, and I'm really glad and impressed to hear about this database and that you have those awaiting trial, those who have been convicted. Because what used to happen in the past was the majority of the prisoners were awaiting trial, sometimes for years beyond the term that they would have been sentenced to. A terrible situation. So I wanted to ask you, what else has been done with regard to prison reform? There's a quote that has been attributed both to the VP and to the former Minister of Interior, Lieutenant General Dan Bazao, and basically along the lines of any person who goes into prison comes out as an animal. What are we doing in our penitentiary system? It's supposed to be restorative. It's supposed to not completely dehumanize and debase these men so that when they are released, they commit even worse crimes.
I think what happened is that in order to ensure that prison system has the ability to achieve one of its purpose, which is to reform and rehabilitate, there's need to have an enabling environment in prison. And one of the factors that will ensure that is the number of facilities in the prison system. All the prisons are congested in Lagos State. You know, there's no gain in saying that. Everybody knows that. I think what is important for us as a government is to ensure that what do we do in order to ease this problem of congestions. And like I alluded to earlier, one of the things we do is plea bargain. And also that is very important, we've emphasized the importance of restorative justice. The Director of Public Prosecution, who is my immediate manager, Ms. Jide, she's very, very keen on restorative justice in the sense that where she knows that, look, justice will be better served by the particular terms of sentence. We will make recommendation to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General, once is agreeable to, for example, if somebody has stolen your money and is able to refund that money back, and the victim is reconciled with the defendant, there is no point the person spending time in prison, because if he goes to prison, you will not get your money back. So you are better off with a narration of restorative justice by ensuring that if he's able to pay you that money back, you will be able to be reconciled with him, and he will have an opportunity to turn, to turn to being a better prison. I'm not aware of that quotation that is attributed to the Minister of Interior. And what is very, very important is that what are the programs of the state government to ensure that prison is decongested, prison serve the purpose of reforming and rehabilitating. You know, the problem there, which is an handicap to the state government, is that prison is a federal institution. The prison is not directly under state government, but we provide an enabling environment for them to actualize and be able to carry out their statutory responsibility, just like we do with the police, with the support of RSS and other federal agencies. So until we have a change in the Constitution that will allow a state prison, then it will go a long way in solving the problem of overcrowding and also providing training facility, adequate and meaningful training facility for inmates, so that when they come out, they have a skills, they have a vocational training to resort to. Because if they don't have a skill to resort to, in no time they will commit offense again. I've been in court many times that I've seen offenders that have once prosecuted for an offense and they are back there. The public domains are washed without information, so I'm not saying anything that is unusual. Even some people will commit offense while they leave the prison premises, institution, because they haven't even got money to get back home or to go back to where he used to live. So he might want to pickpocket in finding his way back to where he originated from, thereby committing another offense. So you have him back into the system. So what the federal government needs to do is to afford the prison institution more facilities and more training in terms of vocational training for inmates, so that when they come out, they are able to get themselves together, acquire a skill, and be able to do something meaningful for themselves. I think that one is very, very important. What we can also do as a state, which I know we are doing, like which I alluded to earlier, was that the Director of Public Prosecution is very, very keen on restorative justice. And we use the plea bargain approach to ensure that where relevant cases are dealt with, it can be dealt with under the law within the plea bargain agreement. But however, we need to sound a public warning that plea bargain is not to evade justice. Plea bargain is to ensure accelerated, justice for the victim, for the society, and also for the defender. So it's a very three-pronged approach. So when we are looking at plea bargain, we're not looking at it from the perspective of the defendants only, of the criminal only. It will only be acceptable if the purpose of justice will be served for the victim and also for the larger society. So we have that responsibility of reconciling those conflicting interests, which is always an ongoing, issue for us within the department. And we will try our best, obviously, through the plea bargain committee to ensure that that purpose is better served. I think that's what we do. I think in terms of other things that can be done in reforming the prison, you need the NGOs as well, people who provide legal advice, to be able to go into prisons and find out which inmates do not have legal representation. And once they have legal representation, they can bring application before court so that they can be represented. But the problem of not having legal representation is being over-exaggerated by inmates. And I can tell you, I've been a prosecutor for over 20 years, so I know what's going on there. At times, the inmates also play the system by not wanting to come to court, hoping and thinking after some time the case will be struck out, which is pointless, because the system knows that you are there. There's no way your case is going to be struck out in order to escape justice, in order to evade justice. So what we do effectively is to keep on liaising with the prison authority to make sure that they bring inmates to court, to ensure that they face trials and the trials is concluded expeditiously. I think those are the things that needs to be done. I think in terms of wanting a permanent solution, just like the narrative about the need to create state police, I think there's need to create state prison as well, so that the states that has the resources will be able to support the prisons in that state and provide enough vocational skill training opportunity. In fact, even work with NGO. There are international NGOs that are ready, Prison Reform International, that are ready to provide an enabling environment in terms of providing skills and whatever. So we've looked into the, I think one of the other things that is also very, very important, like you have in other jurisdictions, is to have young offender institutions, so that definitely young offenders who have breached the law, they are able to be sent there to be retrained, to be rehabilitated, and be able to do something with their life, with their adult life. There is that constraints now, and the law doesn't, how will I put it? I think the law is mindful of that. That's why the law has provided under the child's right law that children offender must be dealt with separately from adult offender, and they need to be kept separately as well, so that there is no contamination, if there's anyone, between more experienced criminals who would pollute and use this juvenile to commit further offenses. So that's one area as well that I know that the government of His Excellency Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu is also looking at, to ensure that justice is brought to everybody who has infracted the law, both young and old people, both juvenile and adults. And more like I said, I think that there is need for state prison in order to be able to provide that enabling environment. And this is just a personal opinion on my own part. Yeah.
We're going to be wrapping up with you soon, so I want to make sure that I ask this question. On the issue of sexual offenders and also the special court, one of the things about the evidence that is most useful for someone who has been a victim, especially a victim of rape, is a rape kit. Yes. And under the law right now, a rape kit has to be performed in a public hospital, not a private hospital. But for a victim, the one thing they just want to do is get a rape kit. What can be done to make sure that all rape kits are submissible in court?
I think what happens now is that for medical examination of victims of rape to be authentic, so to say, there is a primary health care facilities that have rape kits in all the primary care centers. And you have the state's general hospitals and teaching hospitals as well. Victims are referred there, and where they don't have to pay for rape kits. But I know for private hospital, there might be a fee that is applicable, I'm not sure. But I think in terms of ensuring that there is no interference with the process of eliciting, or getting sample from the victim, that's why the law will often prefer a government hospital or a primary health care center, because it's easy to be able to superintend on what happened in all those places because they are government institutions. And that is the only reason, that is the only policy justification. But I'm not going to pretend I'm not aware of the challenges faced by people by victims who probably are not aware of the location of primary health care or only go to the first available hospital. I think the advice is that if you've been to a private hospital, as soon as possible, go to a primary health care near where you live, so that can sort of authenticate whatever happens at the private.
Thank you so much for that advice for everyone. Thank you for spending time with us this morning.